Hey everyone, and welcome to the first ever Suffolk Police podcast. My name is Mandy and I am the Public Information Officer, and today I am joined by Chief James Danny Buie and our Community Outreach Coordinator, Joan Turner. Now Chief, this podcast is something you really wanted started, and we're kind of dropping it in people right now. So why is this something that was so important to you?
Well, I know, Mandy, that you and Joan talked about this several months ago and getting it started and what we were going to do, how we could better share information internally with the police department and externally with our community partners, and how they could get information and we would put out information, and we thought a podcast would be the best way to do it. So after months of thinking about it and months of talking about it, today is the day, and want to get it started, and we want to share as much information with the public as we possibly can about what goes on in our police department.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's something we kind of want to do today, is just have an overview with you of kind of how the Suffolk Police Department works.
Okay.
But we're going to start right now with a little bit more about you.
Okay.
So you became officially the chief in July of this year, but you had been serving as intern for a while. But tell me a little bit about your journey to becoming chief. I know you've said before, when you first became a police officer, that wasn't always something that was the goal, but as you moved up, it sounded like it got more and more of an interest to you.
Certainly. It was, first of all, becoming a police officer in the city of Suffolk is something that I didn't do till I was 30. I was 30 years old when I became a police officer, which is kind of late in the game as far as policing goes. But for me, it was the best way to do it because I was maturing, and I think I've said it before that my current wife, who I was dating at the time, told me I had to get a real job or find another girlfriend. So I decided to go ahead and get a real job, and I decided to come out and take the test for Suffolk at age 30. I didn't know that I would pass it. I didn't really think I would, but I did. And then I was accepted to go to the academy in 1996. And when I started it, to answer your question, I was thinking, first of all, I can just get through this academy and, keep this job for as long as I can, things would be okay. So I always, in the academy, I would sit there and I would wait and I would say, they're going to come in here any moment now and tell me, hey, Danny Buie, you come out, you're really not supposed to be here. Somebody made a mistake, and they didn't really look at you good enough before they hired you. But, that never happened. I made it through the academy, ended up doing okay there, graduated first from Suffolk out of the academy, and started my career in law enforcement. And with my wife and I talking about it, we always talked about, hey, if you could retire as a lieutenant, if you could make it to the rank of lieutenant and retire, then life would be good. So I started working towards, follow my career path, and then decided to start trying to promote. And Chief Bennett used to always say it, and it holds true, is that you got to be a little bit good and you got to be a lot lucky. You got to be in the right place at the right times, and things need to be happening at the right time. That always fell in place for me. And as I made lieutenant and went up, and I said, well, I'll test for captain because nobody else was testing. And they ended up making another major's position, which opened up a captain's position, and I was the only one who tested, so I made captain, and then I was like, all right, this is good. I don't have to test anymore. And then Chief Bennett brought up testing for major, that you had to go through a process to test for major. So I went through that process and made major. And then again thinking, my God, I cannot believe that they're leaving me in charge of all this stuff. And as time went on, I realized that, I can make a difference in a major's position, and I can make more of a difference in a chief's position. If I get to that point, I can kind of make the changes in the Suffolk Police Department that I believe to be important, and that would make the Suffolk Police Department a better police department. So, as the opportunity arose, I applied for the position of chief, and I was hired in July as chief of police, and I plan on holding this position for as long as I can.
For long-term goals, as Suffolk continues to grow, and we are growing, what are some of your long-term goals for the department?
Long-term goals for me is that Suffolk, the police department, has got to grow with the city. The city is growing at a rapid rate, And we figure by 2045 that there'll be over 135 residents in the city of Suffolk. So our goal is, for long term, is we have to grow with the city. We have to have a third precinct. Eventually, we have to have a fourth precinct. And I see the City of Suffolk Police Department as being a 5-precinct police department as the city grows into its land mass. So in order to do that, in order to have enough police officers to have a third precinct, starting there, is to have a third precinct in the next 20 years, and to have enough police officers to man it, and to have no vacancies here, we need to hire 100 new police officers.
Okay.
Which is a monumental task. You know, it is something that's very difficult to find qualified people to be police officers, you know, and even to get applicants. You know, we're starting to do better and better and get more and more applicants, but in order to keep up with the growth of Suffolk, by 2045 we have to hire 100 new positions, which would put Suffolk Police Department at over 300 sworn police officers. You know, so that is the all-time long-term goal, is to not just keep up with growth of the city, but for us to get ahead of it a little bit.
Yes.
To not just always be struggling with the bare minimum, but to be ahead of it and to say, hey, we have, not only do we have enough people, we have more than enough people.
Yes.
So that would definitely one of the long-term goals is growth for our police department and adding new police precincts as time goes on.
Okay, sounds great.
Yeah, and on the other end of that, you know, you've been at the helm now for a few months. So what are some of those short-term goals that are more attainable in the next few months or even the next year?
0 vacancies is it's kind of a long-term / short-term goal. We have to get our vacancies under control in order to fully staff our detective bureau, to fully staff our special investigations unit, our neighborhood enforcement team, and to not just have minimum staffing on our patrols at night, you know, and during the daytimes. It's having to have the fully staffed where you're not at minimum staffing when you go into roll call, that you have more than enough people to handle the calls for service that can come to you during that shift. So getting to 0 vacancies does so many different things. It helps our patrol units, it helps our specialty units, and our specialty units, in my opinion, like our SIUs, our NET, they're the ones those are what I consider to be the crime-fighting units. They're the ones that are out there, and they're utilizing the intel and the data. It's not that our uniform patrol people don't fight crime, because they do. They're on the front lines every day, but their roles are different. Our smaller units can act on actionable intelligence. You know, when we have areas in the city that we know routinely give us violent crimes and cause us problems, and we can focus on that and close out those violent crimes and reduce the crime rates in those specific areas. So getting the manpower where it needs to be in order to staff all of our other units is the everyday battle.
Okay. And as far as women in law enforcement, can you talk about the 30-30 initiative, and why is having women in law enforcement important to you?
And women in law enforcement, because Suffolk is such a diverse community in race and gender, that it's important that we work very hard towards having a very diverse police department. And with that, I can tell you lately here that I've said it out loud numerous times, that the women in our police department are the best in the country. We have some of the best and the brightest women in our police department, and they're not only the best and the brightest women in our police department, they're the best and the brightest in our police department. They are just top notch. So the 30 for 30 is we want at least 30% of our police department to be women by 2030. And we're working steady towards that goal. And I think the last check of what that number was, we were right at, I think, around 20% to make it to our 30%. And we're working very hard to get to that 30 at 30. And the women in the police are important because they're just good at what they do. They really are. They're good at what they do. Suffolk is very fortunate to have some of the best officers in the country in general, but I would put our female officers up against any officers in the country, and I would guarantee you that we would come out in the top 5 in the country. We have some of the best females that the country has to offer. And we want to add to that.
Yes.
We want to keep adding to that. And not only do we just want to hire women officers, just like male officers, we want to hire very qualified women officers.
Yes.
That can,
Sounds great.
And you've talked a lot about, filling those vacancies and growing with the city of Suffolk. So I want to talk a little bit now about how our recruitment works, but also retention. And I want to kind of start it off with retention. I think for you, it might be a good thing because you are more personable. You are approachable in a way that maybe some chiefs aren't, or some people of power, you would think they're kind of big and scary, but you have your open door policy and stuff where you let any of our officers or anybody come in and talk to you. So tell me a little bit about that and kind of how that is your approach or any other approach that we have to retain our employees.
yeah, and retention, Mandy, and we're going to recruit and we're going to hire. And I'll say this, and we've talked about this before, is in order to get three good applicants, we have to take 100 applications. So we're really only able to hire 3% of the people that apply to the police department. So we're always going to continue to do that. This year alone, we added it up recently from January this year, we've hired 40 people. But where that can make a difference, I mean, it can make a difference all the time, but where it makes its best difference is that we retain the people we have. You can't keep bailing the boat and not fix the leak. We have to stop the boat from leaking. And in order, I was just in a roll call with some of our officers yesterday, and retention is what you need. We're going to hire people. We're going to keep working at that day in and day out. We're going to go through thousands of applications. Day in and day out, our recruitment team works really, really hard to bring people through the door, and I mean, it's just nonstop. I get files across my desk every week, and 90-some% of them are, we have to cease the process on this person because of this, and this, because of a background check or a disqualifier of some sort, and you only get to actually interview a very few people. But in order for our recruitment to be successful, our retention has to be successful. And the way we do, having an open door policy for me that's just my way of doing it. That doesn't mean that it's the right way. It doesn't mean that other chiefs that don't do that are wrong. That's just the Danny Buie way of doing that, because that's just the person I am. I am a personable person, and I know that all of us aren't perfect. And that's why I like to interview everybody, because we all make mistakes. It doesn't mean we can't get past them in order to get somebody hired. If it can be something that's minute or that's little there that it puts them on the edge. Or can they be hired or can they not be hired? And that's why we bring them in for that interview, to talk about what's keeping them on the edge and can we get past that. But in order to retain our people, they have to know. They have to know that we're going to treat them fair, that we're going to compensate them fairly, that they're going to, when it comes down to it, everybody has to pay the rent, right? And they want to pay their bills, and they want to live comfortably. And as a police department, we have to offer them good packages. We don't have to offer them, we don't have to be the 5th best in Hampton Roads. We don't have to be the 6th best in Hampton Roads. We don't want to be the 3rd best in Hampton Roads. We want to be the 1st best in Hampton Roads. I want people, when they say, I want to be a police officer, the first place they come to is Suffolk to check. And if it ain't that way, then we're not doing our job properly. This should be the preferred place in the country to come work. And if it can't be that way, then we're never going to get to 0 vacancies, because we're going to lose people to other agencies because they offer better things than we do, or they provide, better leadership than we do. We have to do our jobs from the very top, all the way down, be fair, consistent, and our job is to help our people. When somebody's struggling, our job is to help them, not to, hey, let's write them up and see what we need to do to get rid of them. Let's help them. get through their problem, so they can continue to stay employed here. You know, that doesn't mean we're looking the other way. That means we're just dealing with a problem and we're fixing that problem so that person can continue their career. I've dealt with a lot of people who have had a lot of things go on in their careers to where they have, been in internal affairs many, many times back and forth, and those people are still here today, and they are some of the best police officers we have here. So we want to retain our people. I want our people to know that as chief of police, that I'm always going to treat them fairly, and I'm always going to work really hard to make sure that they get the best compensation packages that they can get in order to provide for their families the best way that they can.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Can you talk about your time and your life in Suffolk and why you chose to stay and what make it so special to you?
Suffolk, and Joan, you know this because you and I are cut from the same cloth, kinda. It's Suffolk has been my home forever. Yeah, I grew up in Nansemond Shores in northern Suffolk, and that was way before Harbor View, and that was when you had our neighborhood, a convenience store across the street, and George and Steve's Steakhouse. And the rest was you had to go to Churchland or to Western Branch or to Portsmouth to do anything. You know, Suffolk has, grown immensely. And I've been here and I've seen it and I watch it, and this is, you spend all your time when you're younger thinking, trying to go somewhere. I'm trying to go somewhere, and then you finally realize when you get to a certain point that I'm there. And I've been there all along. I never knew it. You're always reaching out for, I want to be somewhere else, and then finally I realized that this is the place I want to be. This is my home. This is where I raised my family. This is where I went to school. This is where I've spent the last 29 years in law enforcement. So to answer that question, I love the fact, and I know this sounds, I don't know, sounds corny, maybe is the word for it, but I love the fact that we still talk to each other, that we pass each other at Walmart, not me and Joan or me and Manny, because we always talk to each other, we know it, but me and a stranger, and we speak and say, hey, hello, how are you, or what's going on, or whatever the case may be. And that little thing right there, I think, is where I just went to Boston for several days for a Chiefs conference, and that doesn't happen in Boston. I passed by twice as many people, but it didn't change me, right? Because I was still going, how you doing? How you doing? And they were looking at me like I was crazy, probably getting ready to call the police because they think I'm getting ready to steal their wallet or something. But I like Suffolk because we still talk to each other. We don't always get along. We don't always agree, but we speak to each other. And you don't get that in other places. If you've never been to other places, you don't get that there. You don't get the community-oriented, everybody's my neighbor kind of atmosphere, and that's what I love about the city. And this is where I grew up. This is where I work, and this is where I'm going to die. This is it for me. So this is your city, and this is my city, and I'm gonna be here to the bitter end, and then I'll leave it to y'all.
In your opinion, what makes the Suffolk Police Department special or better or different than other departments?
And I'll start out by giving credit to my predecessors before me. When, I can go back as far as Chief Jackson, that they ran this police department where honesty and integrity was of the utmost importance. They didn't just say that, they meant that. And they held you accountable for the things that you did. And every chief of police since then that I've known have passed that torch down. From Chief Jackson to Chief Freeman, to Chief Bennett, to Chief Chandler, to Chief Wilson. They pass that down, and they say that whatever we do in our police department, that honesty and integrity is of the utmost importance. I can tell you this wholeheartedly for the Suffolk Police Department, that if you lie at the Suffolk Police Department, you will not work here. Cut and dry. Every officer that's watching this knows that, and now every community member out here knows that. And that's not the Danny Buie rule. That's every police chief that's been before me and me's rule. So that's what makes this police department special, is that we don't tolerate dishonesty, lack of integrity, or bad behavior from our police officers at any time. Most of our internal affairs investigations, they don't come from our citizens saying our police officers are doing wrong. They come from our police department looking at video and figuring out things on their own, saying, hey, you know what, that's not the way that should have been handled. And we deal with it internally. We police ourselves extremely well, and that's what makes this department special. You know, that, and I don't know, I can't speak about other departments. I'm sure they have the same types of rules, but I do know here in the Suffolk Police Department that is the one rule that has always been in place and has never been, we've never wavered from it. We've never wavered from it. So as a community, you guys and girls can certainly trust that if a Suffolk police officer is dishonest, deceitful, or tells a lie, and they are caught in that lie, they will not work at the Suffolk Police Department. Guaranteed.
Now, Chief, this was our first podcast. We just scratched the surface of really what all this department entails, and that's kind of one of the goals of this, is to dive deeper into everything we do here. But we got to learn a little bit about you as well, but I wanted to open the floor now for you. We have the citizens of Suffolk watching, hopefully, so is there anything else you would like to add or say or talk about that maybe we haven't touched yet?
Certainly, and I would say to the people watching, the citizens, is first of all, thank you for watching, and this is our very first podcast, and we're going to do many, many more. We're going to bring these to you on a weekly basis for a little while and going over different things. So please continue to tune in. If this one isn't quite what you thought, now you can blame that on me, because this is my first one, and I'm got a face for radio. So bear with us on that. Don't hold this one against Joan or Mandy. This would be my fault if it don't work out the way it is. But know this, you know, that we appreciate our citizens in Suffolk. We appreciate when things are going bad all over the country, that our citizens stay with us, they trust us, that y'all give us the benefit of the doubt. And that's what I've always asked for, is that no matter what's going on in the country, in Los Angeles or Minnesota or any other state, you know, in the country, you guys only hold us accountable in Suffolk for what we do. And that's what I ask, is that if we do something wrong, I want you to hold us 100% accountable, you know, but please don't hold us accountable for what some police officer, who probably shouldn't have been a police officer in the first place, does in California or does in another state. That's not Suffolk Police Department. Our police department is based on integrity and honesty and a partnership with y'all. So please don't judge us by what other people do, judge us by what we do. And we appreciate the partnership and the community atmosphere we have in our city. I talked about it earlier, about we speak to each other. We communicate with each other. So as long as we continue to do that, bad things will happen, but together we'll work through them. And I appreciate everybody tuning in to this podcast, and I look forward to doing many, many more.
All right, Chief. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. That is all we have for today. Stay tuned for next week, November 15th. We'll be dropping our next one. It'll be on our CALEA assessment. So if anybody has any questions or anything about how we do CALEA, go ahead and drop us a comment below, and we'll make sure those are answered. We'll be joined by Major Jesse Epperson.